I'm Hannah Ewence, a historian at the University of Chester. I'm standing here today beside the statue of Viscount Combermere. He looks out to the ornate structure of the Grosvenor Bridge and across to the Rudi, England's oldest racecourse. Off to his right-hand side are the archaeological findings of Chester's medieval nunnery pulled down by King Henry VIII, and over here is the riverside campus of the university. In fact, he is the perfect figure to greet visitors to this city since his statue was put up in 1865. However, as our students discovered in their research, he hides a very dark past, which is only now just coming to light. So who was this apparently great man? The statue's plinth gives us some idea. As the inscription on the plinth tells us, he was a military leader whose high point came when he commanded the cavalry in the Peninsular War. He later served as a governor of Barbados, the commander-in-chief of Ireland and later of India. By 1825, so great was his reputation that he was awarded a peerage and the title of Chester's Hero. Celebrated as tender, considerate and humane by one Chester newspaper, by the time of his death in 1865, he was a veritable legend. When our second-year students researched his life 2 years ago, they noted the great shock and sadness felt by Cestrians at his passing. And in fact, local people readily donated to the fund to help raise this statue. The day of the unveiling of the statue, a miserably rainy and cold October Wednesday, nonetheless brought forth huge crowds to this large square right by Chester Castle, all eager to catch the first glimpse. Yet fast forward 155 years and a rather different crowd have recently gathered at its base. Black Lives Matter protesters who have labelled Combermere a slave owner. As parliamentary papers reveal, Combermere was awarded compensation of almost £3,500, which is over £200,000 in today's money, and shared the sum of almost £4,000 with his cousin Barbara Young for the loss of 420 slaves at 2 plantations he owned in St Kitts and Nevis in the Caribbean. He inherited the estates from his mother and aunt, whose family had connections with the West Indies going back several generations. This really is a story of eminence to infamy, which can be replicated ad infinitum. In cities up and down the country, the legacies of formerly celebrated figures, Cecil Rhodes in Oxford, Edward Colston in Bristol, and even wartime Prime Minister Winston Churchill standing in Parliament Square, have all been the subject of searing reappraisals in recent weeks and months. But what is it specifically about these figures as public art which causes such outrage? Are statues merely an easy target? Indeed, Chester itself might have been lampooned for playing a role in the slave trade in the 18th century, both as a trading port and as a home to wealthy merchants who invested in the trade. Yet this murky past has found little traction in histories of the city. Slave ownership was not Combermere's only morally reprehensible act. His brutal suppression of an uprising in Bhurtpur, India, led to a siege with tragic consequences. Reports of the number of Indian dead range from 4,000 to 10,000. However, Combermere's biographers have, by and large, brushed aside the true scale of this deadly campaign. As Combermere's complex legacy suggests, Chester's entanglement with the British Empire runs deep. Changing attitudes to the statue demonstrate that the relationship local people had and still have with Britain's imperial past is complicated. In the mid-Victorian period, at the height of the empire's reach, Cestrians took pride in the military endeavours of its homegrown hero, but thought little about his other, far less laudable dealings with subjugated people. By the mid-20th century, As the British Empire entered its final death throes and former colonies gained their independence, Combermere was all but forgotten. His statue, now marooned between lanes of passing cars, had become little more than a useful traffic island for harried pedestrians. It has taken a moment of global reckoning to bring Combermere's name to the fore once again. What will be the fate of his statue hangs precariously in the balance. But one thing is for certain, now these conversations about Britain and her imperial past have started, they must not end. And bringing university students in on this conversation is also absolutely critical. Global protests demonstrate there is no place for prejudice and racism in modern society. But only future generations will decide how well we remember this lesson.